InDigital is on a mission to improve the 911 industry. Our goal is to create something better to go above and beyond the current standards. Our passion for creating the most advanced, well-designed solutions led to our position as an industry leader in next-gen core services. For the millions of calls processed over our emergency IP networks, to our Text for 911 solution, Texty, to our disaster recovery and backup solution, Mevo, it's easy to see we love what we do. For more information, check us out at www.indigital.net.
Rapid Deploy believes that every public safety agency, regardless of size, should have access to the data they need when it matters most. That's why since 2016, our mission has been to reduce emergency response times and improve public safety. We are the industry's only integrated emergency response platform. Our web-based cloud platform includes analytics, mapping, dispatch, and mobile apps, purpose-built for 911 in the 21st century. Visit www.rapiddeploy.com to learn how we enable effective, efficient, data-driven emergency response.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be Within the Trenches, true stories for the 911 dispatchers who live them. This broadcast is sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy, and thank you all for this year. I believe once this episode is December 22nd right now, but it's going to be a couple weeks or so before this episode goes out there. I don't think it'll be the new year yet, but if it is, Happy New Year. and thank you all for the love and support, just everything throughout the last year. 2020 has been a crap year, man, but a lot of good stuff has come out of it as well. Very, very grateful and thankful for a lot of things that did come out of this entire year. And it has actually been really good. So thank you, all of you, from the sponsors to all those who watch, listen, and support. And of course, the patrons. I wouldn't be able to do this without all of you. So thank you so very much. And I'm excited for this episode. There's already, from talking to her right in the beginning, there's a lot of stuff that I want to know, and a lot of stuff that we're going to learn together, from her story and how everything runs where she's at. So my guest today is Lauren, and she is the National Training and Coordinating Manager at St. John Ambulance out of New Zealand. Hey.
Hello, how are you?
I am doing very well. How about yourself?
Great, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
And I am excited to have you. We were talking just a couple of minutes ago, and you are currently in the future.
I am. It is the 23rd here, 7 a.m.
That's right. Oh, man. When you had sent the request to schedule an episode, I didn't even look at the date. I was looking at the times, and one of them, I think it was going to end up being almost like 3 a.m. for you. And I thought, no, I can't put anybody through that. So I was trying to go as far as I could so that it would at least be somewhat of a decent time to have you come on, and we can talk back and forth. So I am very, very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
So you've been you've been in emergency services for about 14 years now, right?
I have, yeah. Started in 2006 as a call handler and
Mhm.
obviously worked my way up to the role that I'm in now, which is managing the training and the quality of our dispatch and call reviews nationwide.
So let's go back in time then, a bit, and I want to go back to 2006. How did you get started to begin with? I mean, do you come from an emergency services background, and also the fact that you're out of New Zealand? So it's triple one, right?
Yes, triple one, absolutely, yep.
Okay, so do you come from an emergency services background, like with family? You know, do you have family members in emergency services as well, or did you just kind of dive in?
I kind of dived in. There was really didn't have anyone that was involved in emergency services. I'd recently come out of the army as a medic, and then did a few months as a first aid instructor. And saw this ad in the paper, and my mum was like, "Oh, you should apply for this." I was like, "Yeah, I could do that. I could give instructions over the phone." And I used to do combat medic stuff.
Mhm.
And so I applied, and I was successful, and obviously started as a call handler, working in 2006, which was very, very interesting role.
Yeah, I can imagine. You know, when I jumped in as well, it wasn't. It really wasn't what I was expecting. You know, going into it, I only had, the experience that I had was coming from, older TV shows and movies, and thinking, oh, okay, this is how it works. But it doesn't. It doesn't work like that. When people think that calls are coming in and they can find you wherever, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. People just sort of, when you answer the phone, they're sort of like, well, you know where I am. And we've got the technology now in New Zealand where we can trace mobile phones, which is quite exciting. And that was never in when I was a call handler. And to see where we've advanced from when I started to where we are now, just with the technology, and obviously things like what we call shorthand comments. So a call handler can type in like a couple of letters,
Mhm.
and what it will do will type out like an entire sentence for them. So they're not typing a whole pile of stuff. When I started, you had to be very quick at typing and very accurate, because once you entered in those notes, they were there forever. You couldn't edit them, which I'm sure is the same around the world.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's been so many advances since when I started as a call handler, which is a good thing. And we're constantly improving what we do. Obviously, over here we have our own continuous improvement team who are responsible for looking at new software and technology and improving our processes. And then obviously my team are the ones who train it out and coach and just review that quality to make sure that we are abiding by those SOPs.
So what was it like for you then in the beginning? I mean, you get in there. I mean, what was that hiring process like? What was the training like? I always like to compare, how it is in other areas versus I guess really what it was like for me when I first started out. So let's kind of paint the picture here. You go in for this interview. Is there like a panel of people that you're sitting with and they're just firing questions off, or is it just one on one?
Yeah, and that's another thing that's changed since when I started. So basically, the process for me was you put your application in, you had someone give you a call, and they read out a paragraph about a traffic accident, and you had to pick out key things. So they were testing your recall. From there, you were then invited to an assessment day. So that involved various sort of what I'd call sort of panel areas. There was computer work, so they were testing your basic computer skills. There was a group activity, so they were saying how you integrate with other people. There were role plays that you had to do, so you had a script, which was pretty much the same as ProQA,
Mhm.
and you had, I think it was 2 calls. One was a frantic mother whose baby was having a seizure, and the second one was a person with chest pain. So you had to obviously read out the questions, type in the notes, so they were checking to make sure that you were accurate with your notes, and then had to give the instructions. So again, they were checking to make sure you didn't go off script, that you were following instructions, and checking your tone and your empathy as well. So looking at where you would reassure the caller and things like that. And I think there were a couple of other things. And then you moved on to, if you passed that, you moved on to going to the actual centre and having an interview with 2 managers. And I remember at the end of the interview them asking me, would you like to go and have a look at the centre here in Christchurch? And at that time in New Zealand, we had various centres around the country dotted around that did just took calls and dispatched for those areas. That was when I started, and obviously afterwards they started closing them down to have main central centres. But I remember going and saying, yeah, I want to see what it looks like, and expecting this frantic centre with lots of people, taking these 111 calls for ambulance. And I walk around the corner, I still remember it, and I thought, gosh, I must have sounded pretty kind of snobby sort of thing. And I said, is this it? Because there was 1 call handler, 1 dispatcher, and 1 manager on. That was it.
Oh, wow.
And obviously that's now changed to, you've got 2 managers on shift, you've got 5 to 7 call handlers, and then around 5 sort of dispatchers, depending on how many channels are in each centre. So yeah, that was the first impression, and I was kind of like, wow, is this it? But it was an interesting process, but it was good though, because it was quite thorough. Obviously, you had your psychometric testing as well, and your typing. But it wasn't just an interview and you got the job, so you knew you had to work for it, which was a good thing.
Right. Yeah. So just listening to you say everything that you went through. So, okay. So let's compare here. when I started at the last place I was at, where I finished out my dispatching career, when I started there, I went in for an interview, a 2-person interview there. It was the deputy director, and then it was the county administrator that was there, and they were firing off questions to me, and we're going back and forth. There was a written test, and that was it. There was nothing else. I think maybe I walked the floor there in the center. But other than that, it was that written test. I think there was only like 3 or 4 questions that we could miss. That was it. If you missed any more, then you were done. But basically that's what it was. It was that test, which was really all common sense, And there's still one question that I can remember from way back then that still bothers me because I knew that I was answering it wrong, but I second guessed myself. Originally I put down the right answer. And I was like, no, maybe that's not it. Maybe I'm thinking this is too easy. Maybe I need to think more into it. And that's where it screwed me up. But yeah, even now I laugh about it. Like, man, I knew I should have went the other way. Either way, that's all it was. And listen, you're going in. You've got the 2 calls that you mentioned, and you're going on that. They're testing you on your empathy and just everything, and that, I think that's pretty awesome. That's pretty cool that you go through all of that. And for all I know, I know that there's a test here in the States. It's called Critical. I'm not sure how much that one.
We used it. Yeah, we used it for one recruitment. I love it.
Yeah.
Is one of the. I think it should be in there as one of the stages, because I remember we were setting it up and having members of my team do it, and they were the frustration they were having, because this is like, oh, we've got to beat it. But it tests so many different areas that give you an appreciation for, because you want to set the people up that are coming into the comm centres. Exactly. You don't want to set them up to fail. So you want to get the right people in there. So down the line, it's not going to cost you both one for them, but also for retention issues and things like that. But how did you find Critical?
Well, for myself, so that was one thing that I've not used. The only reason I know about Critical is because of others who have come on and I've interviewed and they talked about it and stuff, and I've heard good things about it. But for myself personally, I didn't take anything like that. It was just that written test, and then I went back in and they did my background and made it through that, and then I went in thinking that my second interview was just to, I don't know, for them to hammer me more with questions on what I was going to be doing there, and it was basically them welcoming me and saying, "You're hired," and I said, "Oh, how many other people got hired?" And they said, "You were the only one that we chose. You passed that one test." And I was like, "Okay, all right, well let's do it." And then we went from there. But so how long did that hiring process then last for you? Like for me, I think it was a few weeks, but it sounds like yours was a little bit longer.
There's probably a couple of months, by the time you applied, and obviously they did their selection from that and selected people out at each stage, and the assessment centre, and then organising the interview, and then the referee checks, the psychometric testing, all those kind of things. It probably was a good couple of months, sort of waiting as to, am I successful, am I not, and knowing each stage that you were like, yes, okay, I passed that, now the next stage. So when I had the role, I had, more of an appreciation rather than just walking into something. I knew that I had to work for it. So this was going to be a hard job. So yeah.
You walk in though, and it's completely different. You walk in and you see these three people there, but what is it that you're looking at then? Let's go a little bit further to your first day then. You're going in. What are you looking at? Like, are you already sitting at a console with screens all over the place, or are you in a training room?
In a training room, which sat to the side. So we've had 4 different comm centre moves, and obviously after the earthquakes as well, we had to move. But this was on one of the first centres that I was in, and there was a training room to the side, and there were glass walls that you could open up, so you could see into where they were doing the real stuff. And that training was for around 5 weeks, where you learnt, the processes, the software that you had to use, ProQA, and you practiced an MPDS, and you practiced a lot of scenarios. And then obviously that also involved going out onto an ambulance and seeing what it was like, which was interesting, and I think very beneficial to understand the connection between what you do and what the responders see, because obviously over here we have we call MDTs, which are mobile data terminals. I'm not sure if you have the same over there. And every note that we enter goes to them on the screen and the ambulance, and so you've got to be very accurate. But it was good to see that connection and just talking to those crews about what they wanted to hear, and then going back and putting that into practice. But my first day was pretty much just sitting down going, how am I going to learn all this stuff? Like, we had 4 screens of software that was sprayed across, and everything was flashing. And obviously we didn't take a live call until the end of training and you're in your mentoring. We've changed that now to ensure that you're taking your first 111 live call. In fact, you can take a few, that'd be more beneficial, within training, so you feel supported and safe, rather than going on the floor with everyone listening around you that's experienced, and you making a mistake and feeling silly. If you're in the training room with all your friends that you've made within training, it's a safe environment. And then when you go into the mentoring, you feel a little bit more, I've already taken some 111, so it's not my first time.
No, you make me flash back to when I first started, because I remember going in and feeling the same exact way as you. Like, how the heck am I gonna figure some of this stuff out? Like, you see the others that are in there, and they're just going, doing all these different things, and it's just like, okay, all right, I got to learn all the geography. I got to learn all these codes. I got to memorize all of this stuff, because memorization is good, because you can type everything a lot faster when you have it memorized than when trying to look things up. And then, you have to listen to the room as well, to whatever's going on there, but also on the call, you got to listen in there. And yeah, it can be overwhelming. But, to be in there with, with your coworkers and all, it's good, because you get that support. Now, I do have to ask, like, when you were first training and everything, and you're taking these calls now, were you all allowed to interact like a team right off the bat? And the reason I asked that is because when I was in training, no one talked to me. Nobody was talking to me. It was just my trainer and I. And it got to the point where I almost wanted to quit, because I thought, I'm coming in here, we're supposed to be working together to help save lives and keep people safe. But if you aren't talking to me like we're a team, it doesn't feel right. And it didn't feel right. But, a friend of mine that I worked with ended up saying, that's just the way they do it here. As soon as you get to a certain phase, then we're working like a team. And I remember saying to her, like, you got to change that, because I'm ready to quit, because it doesn't feel like we're a team. So how was it for you? Were you able to talk to each other right off the bat?
Absolutely, yeah, because we kind of, like, I remember during training it snowed quite heavily, and I took a couple of the two of them that were on the course with me home, and I remember that, and they were kind of like, drive safely, because it was quite thick snow. We're lucky we left at the time, but yeah, absolutely, we were allowed to talk, and that's the whole thing. It's kind of creating that team environment straight away. And obviously trying to include the mentors as early as you can, so they start to build those relationships, rather than on their first day on shift, where they meet somebody and go, oh, okay, hi. They've kind of already met them around, and hey, and also bringing in the managers. I remember not knowing who the managers were, who any of the staff were, and that was really hard. Where we now try and bring the managers in during training to say, hi, my name's such and such, and I work on this shift, and you'll see me around if you come onto my shift. And it's a lot more supportive than, but I just remember just going, I don't know who anybody is. And it was, and obviously the ranking system over here, so it's pretty similar to the military. And so I was very, having recently come out, I was very regimented, and you must follow process and stuff, and that was different, because there were some people that obviously didn't have that same kind of mindset and stuff. So I found that a little bit of a struggle too.
Yeah, that's one of the things, right? Is trying to kind of learn how everyone works and how they react to each other. It's that emotional intelligence, that mindfulness that you build from working with people, and then you kind of you're able to mold some of those responses, and and all once you get to know them. But it's good that it's a lot more supportive now, because when I had first started out, there were some cases where it was like that as well, where there were some people that didn't know what we did or what was going on. And then if you come in and you're trying to tell me how to do something that you've never done before, come on.
Yes, I think there's still a little bit of that. There's still that, it's got to be a hard process, because it was like that when I started. But I think it is changing. If I think back to one of the calls that I absolutely remember, and that's where I learned very quickly about the comms environment, was I'd taken, like, I was the only call handler on, and there was a dispatcher and a team manager, obviously, took this call, and it was a sore hip. So, pretty confident. I'd sort of taken the call, went on a break, came back into the room, and about 3 hours later, the crew got there, because obviously we're triage system, we're a volunteer ambulance service, so it was triaged as a low priority. When the crew get there, obviously they call up on the radio, patient's deceased. The dispatcher turns around to me and says, "You killed that patient." And I was like, "Oh," and I sat there, and I remember somebody looking at me, and I was just sitting there going, "I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. I've killed someone. This is real." And I went out to what we had as a kind of a breakout room, and I burst into tears, and I was like, "I shouldn't be in this job. I literally must have missed something on the call. Like, what did I do?" And I was like, "They must think I'm stupid." You know, all the things that you go through your mind when you're absolutely brand new. But it's a good thing down the track, because you can empathize with someone starting and going, "Hey, look, you know, this is what it was like for me. So, you know, I can totally get it." And I remember the team manager coming out and he said to me, what's happening? And I just said, I've got to finish this job. Like, I can't do it. Like, I've literally, look what's happened. Someone's died because of what I did. Like, I missed something on the call. And he goes, "We've listened back to the recording. There was nothing. There's literally nothing." He said, "You processed the call correctly." It was someone with, I think, learning difficulties or whatever, that had sort of said, "Yeah, the patient's breathing, you know, and conscious." We're not, obviously they weren't, and they'd been deceased for quite some time. But there was two things that I kind of learned from that. One was the humor in comms.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, that was that kind of humor that wasn't meant to be offensive, but it was meant to be, "You killed that patient," kind of as a joke. And that the dispatcher did apologize to me afterwards, but yeah, that kind of built that tough skin pretty quickly. And the second thing was that this is real, and that what you do as an EMD, emergency medical dispatcher or call handler, is so important. And, you know, getting the right address and getting that accurate information and listening to key things in the background could change the you know, whether the person lives or dies. And I know that's pretty harsh, but it's the truth. And yeah, I always go back to that, and I always used to use that story and that to new call handlers when I was training. And just say, you've got to be so careful. Even though there was nothing in that, from that day on, I absolutely made sure I was like literally switched on. When I answered that call, they had my absolute attention, and any notes, etc., I was entering that were obviously going to be relevant and what have you. But yeah, it's interesting the things you remember.
Yeah, you know, and a lot of those moments, there can be, you know, triggers. There can be, you know, something that you might hear, or even something that you might smell, you know, which is weird to say. You know, you could be eating at your desk or something and smell something or whichever, and then you get a call that really sticks with you, and then it's not till sometimes way later on that you smell whatever it was again, and you flash back. There's the weirdest things that stick with you like that. But so going back really quick to that humor piece, that was something that I had to get used to as well. So I have an odd sense of humor as it is, but when I was working, you know, people would joke with me. You know, with the first place that I worked at was a small police department, and I was the only dispatcher on for 8 hours by myself. It was just me. And when it went crazy, it really went crazy. And I'm, you know, basically kind of blacked out until after it was over. I'm like, what just happened? Like, I know I did a good job, but what just happened? But then, you know, officers would come in and they would talk smack with me, or the chief would say stuff. And I would sit there for a moment like, did I mess something up? Or like, I'm not sure how to read them at first. But yeah, it's the same way. You know, you there's some of those things that you have to learn, because there's dark humor in a lot of these professions, especially in emergency services. And if you don't have, you know, that thick skin, that ability to be human, the common sense, and of course that dark humor as well, man, you're going to be crying more than anything else. And that's when you start to go into that burnout, and some people come back from it and others don't. So that's definitely something that you've got to learn. But it was it was weird to learn how to have, dark humor in this profession.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It is like you say. It's being mindful of it becoming, an issue. And I always say to the call handlers, like, you're gonna cry. At least one call is going to upset you. It could be a trigger from something you weren't aware would be a trigger, but it's how you come back from that and how you manage that that's going to make you successful. But it's also, I think, kind of it's just reminding people that work within communications that, hey, sometimes if it's a new person, they may not have developed that yet. And you just got to watch out for people. I remember there was one call where a guy had literally been cut in half. I know that's horrible, but it was an awful accident. Mm-hmm. And like you say, to deal with that, the whole centre were kind of like, and comments like, oh, he's half the man he used to be, and
right,
which is absolutely fine, and you kind of get that whole thing. It's that. It's the way that you deal with it. But to someone who walked in, they'd be like, oh my God, you guys are really horrible. But it's that black humor that it's how you deal and move forward with it. But I remember looking over at the call handler and thinking, she's not dealing with this. And I said to the guys, hey, okay, that's enough now. And I went over to her and said, are you okay? And she goes, you know what? She said, the first couple of jokes were okay, but actually now it's not. She said that call was really horrible to process. And she said, I know there's going to be a couple of jokes, but she said there's a fine line between where you do too much and you say too much. And yeah, it's I think from that incident we kind of learned a lot as well around where to draw the line, where that humor goes too far.
Right. I think that's one of the good things is to be able to learn from each other, because those could have gone on. They could have continued and had you or no one else, noticed that your coworker, your colleague there was actually having, an issue. It could have continued on and there would have been, worse things that happened, that person might not have asked for help. They might have kept it inside the whole time. So I think it's good, that we can have that camaraderie there, having that humor and all, but also noticing when another person is actually not digging it. And if you can, see that, you're going to continue to work and, work like a well-oiled machine. And that's really how you want it to go. Now with you, you started out, you went through your training, you start taking all of these calls. You mentioned you walk in and there was only 3 people. Now, is that how it is then? Is it only 3 people working, or how many people work on at a time?
So at the moment, you've got 2 managers. We have a call handling team leader. Mm-hmm. They supervise the call handlers. So in each centre, you're probably looking around 5 to 7 call handlers. Depending on the day or roster, annual leave, etc. Then you've got your dispatchers, and that can depend on how many channels. 5 to 7 dispatchers. You've got a duty centre manager who manages the whole centre on that particular shift. And then you've got a centre operations manager that works during the day, Monday to Friday, that manages the entire centre. And then obviously within that, you've got the specialised team. So the training and quality team, my team, you've got the continuous improvement team. So yeah, we all kind of working together. And when I started, just one, and you were very, very busy. Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, we're busy, but at least you got through your shift very quickly, because we do 12-hour shifts, 6:30 in the morning till 6:30 at night. And then 6:30 at night to 6:30 in the morning. But I was, when I started, holiday relief. So I wasn't actually on a roster. So we have 4 rosters over here that work similar to the fire service. So we have brown, red, blue, and green shift. So 4 shifts that work 24/7. But I was holiday relief. So anybody that was on leave, I would literally cover them. So, I might know the next day, you're going to work 1 to 1. We had funny shifts back then. So yeah, it was interesting being on your own, because you didn't feel that you could sort of end that call and turn to talk to somebody and go, hey, that was a really hard call, because
Right.
the manager was sitting in the corner and you didn't want to kind of annoy them. The dispatcher was busy on their channel. And so you were on your own a little bit. So I kind of spent the time just, educating, like I'd grab the map and go, right, I've got to get quicker at this. So zooming in, zooming out. Where is this particular town if I had to locate it quickly? And I'd spend about an hour each shift doing that, just to sort of pass the time away in between calls. But really hard being the only call handler.
I can definitely imagine that. Like I said in the beginning, I was by myself, and in emergency services, anything can happen. And a lot of the calls that I took when I first started out at that small police department, they were not what I would say were real. I mean, some of them were high priority ones, of course, but they weren't ones that I really dealt with when I moved back to my home state, for the central dispatch that I was at. Those types of calls, the call volume, everything was way different. I went from being by myself for 8 hours. We switched shifts every 2 weeks, so it went from 6A to 2P, then 2P to 10P, and then 10P to 6A. Every 2 weeks we switched like that. And when you got to that midnight shift, that 10P to 6A, I think you did it for like a month, and then you end up switching, going right into 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. But for the last center that I was at, it was 12-hour shift. And it was from, because I was a supervisor there, it was from 4:30 in the afternoon to 4:30 in the morning, or vice versa. So, we did it that way. But there were there were other people there. The issue with that, though, was that we didn't always talk to each other about some calls. And of course, nobody wants to look weak, right? In sharing certain things. A couple calls that I had taken, I remember my supervisor at the time, who was actually a girl that I grew up with. We went to school together. She asked me if I was okay. And I said, yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm all right. I got this. But I wasn't okay. And I was just holding it in. And, I had somebody there, but didn't take advantage of it. So anybody who's watching or listening to this, make sure to ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. It's actually, shows courage to be able to ask for help and see when it is when it's something that's needed. But for you, being there for that time and not being able to look to somebody else, but to be able to educate yourself on further things, to help you get better. Definitely, I can see that, kind of taking your mind off of things. But to go along with that, what were some ways that you were able to cope other than educating yourself? How did you cope with some of those harder calls?
I think it's basically talking to someone. It's talking to my family. Obviously, you're not allowed to tell them their absolute details, but you can be pretty generic. It was talking to my family. That's how I kind of got through it. And just taking some time out, de-stressing and completely switching off. So as soon as I finished, and I was on days off, that was it. I was not sort of checking work emails or anything like that. And I was doing a lot of stuff that I enjoyed. So I was, practicing that whole de-stress kind of situation. But it's taken me a very, very long time to work out, what the triggers are for me. A few years ago, I literally went into burnout, which takes a long time to recover. And like you say before, around it's actually okay to not be okay, and to actually ask for help, because I think we can totally forget sometimes that the work that we're doing, they're traumatic. And it was interesting. The other day I had to do a presentation for the senior leadership team that I'm on, and there was a book, The Resilient Dispatcher, James Marshall.
Yes.
Amazing. So I kind of worked off the 9 risk factors of an EMD, and it was going through that and realizing, the triggers and stuff that our staff have, and just being aware of it. And my own experiences, what are your triggers, and being aware to de-stress, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to be ready for that person in their time of need. A couple of the key points I'll sometimes tell staff is, work out what your triggers are, and make sure you're having your breaks. Don't just, having my break later. Try and have it when you're rostered in. Make sure you're drinking lots of water, hydrate. So you're getting up and going to the toilet. That small break, getting up away from that computer, is going to help. Just little things like that, that I find worked for me, may not work for somebody else, but it's just sharing that information and encouraging people to talk, that it's okay that you're going to make a mistake. That's going to happen. So let's just get that out of straight away on the first day. You're going to make a mistake. You're going to get an address wrong. It happens. It's how you come back from that, and how you make sure it doesn't happen again, or that you help someone else with that and go, hey, I had a difficult address. Let's try and find it together. Mm-hmm. So if you get that address, you'll know what to do. And creating those learning opportunities for people, but encouraging them to speak out, that it's okay. If there's a call that you're not getting over, there are lots of support services out there. And just being mindful that, responders get to prepare, because as they're driving to the incident, they're in their mind, they're mentally preparing, because you're seeing what they're going to. You pick that call up, it's like one of those risks that James Marshall in the book. Then they don't have that time. They don't know what that call's going to be, so they can't. It's that mentally prepared that they don't always have or able to do.
It's funny how you say that. When responders are going out there, the field responders, they have that time to prepare. I don't think I've ever really thought about it. Like I know, of course we know they've got that time where they're going and they're reading on their MCTs. And I don't think I answered this before, but we do. We have MDTs and MCTs. The MCTs are, they're a little more of an upgrade, I guess, at least over here. Maybe it was just the company that we went through that they had MCT versus MDT, because we had both. But they do have that time, reading everything that's going. They know what they're going to be getting into. You hear them talking on the radio, preparing.
Yeah.
But not for us.
Exactly. And at the end of each incident, they're kind of going there. They're able to have a coffee. They're going back to station or wherever, their feet up, they're able to, kind of move away from that. The call handlers or dispatchers can't. They're sitting at their desk. They can't just after that particular call go, I'm just going to go and have a break and just put my feet up and have a coffee or what have you. That's the next call. Mm-hmm. And so there's all those things that it's when we're recruiting, preparing somebody for and saying, this is what it's going to be like. Could you sit at a desk for 12 hours with, we have breaks, we have half-hour break and 3 10-minute breaks in a 12-hour shift. So that for somebody who, I don't know, for me, coming from an active, in the military, we were running around all the time. I did 3 PT sessions a day. I started and I put so much weight on because I was not used to just sitting. And you don't realize how, mentally draining it is. And what do? You reach for some sugar, I never used to drink coffee until I started. And, I was drinking up to 10 cups a day. But all those kind of things that you can then bring back to someone new and provide that advice or support, I think is really key to for new staff to help with retention, but also, yeah, from where we were, I think we're getting a lot better in regards to supporting staff.
Yeah, I fully agree. Definitely, it's a new day. Things are changing. People are seeing all of this that's going on, that how it affects us. And I was the same way. I've always had soft drinks, soda that I was drinking and stuff. But when I started working in dispatch in the small police department, I was drinking about 4 or 6, just the 20-ounce bottles of whatever soda that was there, and I was not really paying attention to it. And this is just in 8 hours. Now,
Mhm.
oh man, now I would never do that. I don't drink it anymore. But I remember going to the doctor because I was having pain in like my kidney area, and the doctor asked me like, what are you doing? Like, what are you drinking throughout the day? And I told her, and she goes, "Yeah, you need to stop that. If you're gonna have any soda, drink the clear sodas, not the dark ones, because you're developing a kidney stone. And the medication I'm giving you is going to, you know, minimize it, because right now it's so minuscule. You're just feeling that little bit of pain back there. But if you keep doing this, it's going to be worse, and you don't want to pass that." And I was like, okay, I need to change my ways. But then, as we're talking about the stress as well, I wasn't on blood pressure medication until I started working in dispatch. It was a lot of stress, and I wasn't really taking it in. I wasn't taking care of myself, because we're programmed to take care of everyone else, right?
Yeah.
So the doctor then at that time, this was a different doctor. He says, Ricardo, you probably want to lay off, the stress. Try to not be stressed so much. And I remember laughing, and I said to him, I asked, "Do you know what I do for a living?" And he goes, "No, actually, I'm not sure. I haven't seen you since you were in high school." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'm a 911 dispatcher and call taker as well as supervisor." And he laughs at me right in my face and is like, "I guess you can't stop the stress, can you?" And I said, "No." Like, so, what do you do? So then you figure out other ways. If all of this is going on, the exercising, trying to get more sleep, there's so much that's out there now that people are really starting to share,
Mm.
um, to be able to get better, for us to be better, especially in this profession.
Yeah, and I think also the organisation has a responsibility.
Mhm.
I think sometimes the focus is always on the individual, ask for help, and not every. Sometimes when you're in that, you don't want to ask for help. So those 9 risks, it was good for us to go through and go, hey, look, these have been identified. These are risks that our staff are going to be, that are focused on them. So let's look at some solutions. And we went through each one, and we've created sort of a wellbeing plan that we're going to roll out next year. And that involves various things in regards to dietitians, bringing dietitians in, offering boot camp vouchers, lots of different things around their well-being, and because it is, I think we've got to acknowledge that it's traumatic calls that they're dealing with. And it's constant. 12 hours you could be taking for us a good couple of hundred calls per call handler, and that's a lot to have to then offload at the end and then get home to your family and make sure that you're looking after yourself.
It it is definitely a difficult one, but again, one that I think everyone is really starting to get a handle on, and be able to help. Mental health and wellness is huge, and it's something that people are really paying attention to, and it's about time. It's awesome. It is very cool. I want to go back really quick, because there was a question that I had in my head that I wanted to ask you. So I have, and we kind of talked about this already as well, but so your background before what you're doing now, part of it was being an Army medic. Now, jumping into what you jumped into, how hard was that transition? Like, was there, because you're doing things hands-on and such. Now everything's over the phone. You're creating whatever you're hearing in your head to see. Was it hard not being able to like use your hands?
Yeah, it was. And also some of obviously in the instructions within ProQA, I was like, no, it's not going to do that. Let's do it this way. And I was like, I really struggled to, but, part of that training is also follow the instructions. So, but I was very, very much torn between what you would practically do and wanting to jump through the phone and help the person when they were doing, for example, controlling the bleeding or something like that, or compressions and that is a struggle, for call handlers because they're not able to be on scene and stuff. But yeah, I really did struggle because I was used to that practical. This is what you do. Versus what obviously is in ProQA and what people get taught within first aid. Yeah, very hard.
And that's just another stressor as we're talking about stressors and how to, combat that. And that's why I wanted to ask, because there have been others, even coworkers of my own who come from, fire rescue or EMS, and they come into dispatch, and then they're saying things like you can hear them, and it's like, they're doing things a little different. So then after the call, I would talk to them, and they say, well, that's how we do it, out on the road. I'm like, but you're not out on the road right now. Like policies and procedures and everything is different. And, that's kind of a liability, so you gotta run through how we do it here. I'm glad that you have the experience from being out there, but and sometimes it would work, but there were other times where you knew that you skipped a spot and you're going to have to go back because that could, potentially hurt you or us as a center.
Absolutely.
So how does all of the training work then? You're running this team, this training and quality. What is it that this team does? Like, what is it that you guys are all coordinating and everything for communications?
So we're doing just basically all the training that's required for call handlers and dispatchers. So we're doing the inductions for call handlers. So that's 5 weeks with the classroom training, and then they move into a 5-week mentoring period, which is on shift with their mentor. We're running dispatch induction courses, so that's currently a 9-day in-class sessions that they do, which we never had. Back when I was learning dispatch, it was basically you're on the radio.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, just like anything, you're constantly evolving and improving processes. And mostly coaching, it's those support meetings that are really crucial. With the mentors and just the trainees, just catching up. What can we do? What can we do to improve? It's various training that we do, and observations. We do a lot of remote assessments if we're doing dispatch. So we do the side by side, but we'll also do a remote assessment in that week prior, just so we can tidy up any loose ends and say, hey, look, we've identified this just in preparation for your assessment. You want to look at these areas that you probably never realised before. Also completing reviews. So the trainers will sometimes do dispatch reviews. So we have obviously our normal call reviews. So I've got members of my team that are quality improvement coordinators. So they're doing the call reviews because we're an ACE accredited centre. So we've got quite a few reviews to do each week. And then we've got dispatch reviews. So that's reviewing the dispatches. So we have separate roles in our centres over here, call handlers and dispatchers. And so a dispatch review can take, anywhere up to sometimes 8 hours from the job starting to when the crew are back on station due to the geographical nature of this country.
Wow.
Yeah, it could be that we've had delays, getting to the scene, or waiting on crews to be available, that sort of thing. So, yeah, the trainers will help out doing that, but it's vast and varied. We're currently moving a lot of our training onto e-learning, to a platform because of obviously COVID.
Right.
There was that request of can we do remote training? I still am very keen on doing hands-on training, and that's side by side with that connection, especially when you're learning software, just going through scenarios. But we're moving to a lot of that. So at the moment, that's taking up a bit of our time, creating those packages. But yeah, it's just general induction training, whatever roles they're moving into, and any updates that we have in regards to software or process training. So our standard operating procedures can change quite frequently, and that could be based on a complaint or a reportable event that we've identified a trend, and we're going, hey, look, we need to improve this process. So yeah, they can be quite busy, the team. And obviously it's a nationwide. We work alongside Wellington Free and Wellington, so we try and get the training streamlined where we can, because we are taking calls virtually throughout the whole country. So it's just aligning together and having that consistency in training, because everyone's going to deliver their training differently, but it's the content that we want to make sure is correct.
Yeah, correct, consistent, all of it. And so, Laura, how you mentioned COVID. So what type of impact has this been? Because you say as well, some of these can last like 8 hours, or depending on the situation or whichever, because of geographical issues. So how has there been an impact on some of those responses because of COVID?
To be honest, not really.
Okay.
We were very lucky. I mean, very lucky. I mean, the country went into lockdown pretty quickly, to the level 4 lockdown. So it was only essential workers that were out and about. And my team continued to work, because part of their, as a training officer or as a quality improvement coordinator, if you're training something out or you're reviewing someone and their performance, then you need to be operationally, yourself, because one, you get the respect from everyone on the floor, and two, you understand those frustrations that they have. So when you're training them, you build that connection, as well as when you're reviewing them, you go, you know what, actually that process we need to probably fix, because I found that quite frustrating. But we were lucky in COVID. We actually found that the call volume kind of went down a little bit. But yeah, my team continued to go in to work. Obviously, we had the social distancing, so we had people separated on their desks, etc., within that 1.5 to 2 meter distance. But we did have a COVID course that we wanted to increase the staffing, so we did a quick course on the fly, and had those people on fixed terms. So we had them in case COVID did absolutely flare up. We were lucky it didn't, but it's opened up ideas, I guess, for us around looking at what other centres did during that process. If it did affect us, is there the opportunity to take a call from home? Do we have that technology? Because I think there's a centre in America that does that. So all those kind of things. But yeah, I think we were extremely lucky here that we didn't have really any staff come down with COVID across the country in the comm centres. But that was mainly obviously because of the lockdown that the country had to do, and also the processes and measures in place around the sanitising, the desks. I mean, all you could smell was hand sanitizer or, the desk wipes, because you were literally, clean. And,
yeah.
The hand washing. And we probably have gone, the pendulum swung the other way, which is, I think it's time to remind ourselves to get back on it again now that we've got, potentially there could be a second wave coming. But yeah, we were lucky. Nothing really changed for us here in regards to training. Obviously, we ceased any training because we kept people on the floor. But any general training, the only training we did do was the induction course within Auckland to bring more people on board in case we needed it. So we were lucky.
Well, from what I see in the news and everything, New Zealand is doing it right. So well done. Everything there, seems to be going very well, and best wishes that it continues to go that as well. Because I know here, there are a few centers that actually they got hit. One person, got a couple symptoms that really didn't think it might be something, but then it was an actual exposure. So then, one of the episodes that I did, I believe, was with they're friends of mine out of the state of Illinois, and I'm pretty sure, were one of the first ones that had put out there, we had an exposure here. It ended up actually being okay, but it was a scary thing, and it was also early on when, really didn't know a lot of, how people were reacting to it, or, whichever. There was a lot of policies and procedures that were changing, being added, other questions that were coming in. So there was some impact. They were feeling the impact for sure. But it's awesome to hear, on your end that there wasn't a lot. You were still prepared. You were still preparing and going through everything you were supposed to be doing, but that you were lucky enough that impact wasn't there. So that's awesome. Now I have to ask, what made you want to move up? You go from call handling and all, and then in 2016 you end up stepping into that managing position in managing a team nationwide. What was it that really pushed you towards that?
It was interesting because when I was a call handler, I'd sort of felt that I'd stretched my capacity as much as I could, and I wanted to learn more. So that's when I kind of moved into dispatch, and then gained that training officer position, because it was really just, I've learned all I can, not that I felt I could, and I wanted to increase that skill set even more. So then I could come back into the call handling space, if I needed to jump on the phones with more experience. And in 2016, I was kind of asked, can you just take over the team for 2 weeks? That your manager's away. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but sure. And I'll give it a go. And that 2 weeks ended up being sort of 6 months where I was doing that role, but also being a training officer. So running courses, etc., but also trying to manage the team. And that was extremely hard. But and then obviously the position came up, and I thought, hey, I'm going to give it a go, because, I want to increase my skill set, but, I've got some ideas, etc., and I feel that I could, and here we are today, where I'm still managing the team, and still working in comms, and it's an amazing place to work, and we've got some really good people working for us, and what we do makes a difference. So
that is excellent. As we go into the wrap up of this episode, I have to say right off the bat, it has been amazing to have you on and to talk and to learn more about you. I would love to have you on again on another episode. I'm sure there's a lot that we could talk about, a lot more. Going into the wrap up of the episode, with all of your experience, coming up, and now being the head of training and coordination and all, what is some advice that you have for someone who is also looking to get into the training space? What can they look for when they're training others? We were talking about having that dark humor in the beginning, and noticing when someone is actually kind of struggling beyond those first couple of jokes that go out there, or whichever. So for those who are looking to get into training, what is some advice that you have for them going into it and beyond? What are some things that they can look for or expect?
I guess some of the key things they need to have is like their high compliance. They need to be really keen on learning. So it's not just doing the basic stuff, it's doing above and beyond. You should always be above and beyond the people that you're training around, at that kind of extra level. And you're constantly learning, because if you're training somebody, you need to be doing the same, if not more. And you should be more. It's just being empathetic. It's having that passion to help others. And maybe sharing your experiences and your mistakes to ensure that doesn't happen to somebody else. There's lots of different lots of different things, but that's probably a couple of the main ones. It's having that passion for learning, and having that that high compliance yourself, because you can't really go on training because you won't get that respect from the people on the floor. It's showing them, it's doing the job as well. It's sitting down beside them going, I'm going to take a call as well with you, because I haven't left that role. I'm still doing it, and I can do it when able, because that's really key.
Perfect. Laura, thank you so much again for being on. This has been awesome. Like I said, to learn more about you and how everything is working, and 111. It's just awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, I will be right back here with you. And again, Laura, thank you. This has been an excellent episode. For those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches Podcast. This broadcast has been sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy. And if you are looking for any bonus content, because this show will always be free, but if you're looking for bonus content at all, you can check us out. And that's going to be patreon.com/WTT podcast. And don't forget, we're also on Discord. It's a community that I'm building there. And that is, it's called The Trenches. Now, there isn't an actual, just a straight up URL that I can give you, because it gives a random one every time. So you can jump on to the podcast page and the link will be there. You can check it out. You can join. It doesn't cost anything. It's just a community where we're coming together to have focused conversations in a bunch of different channels, and also jump on live, voice, video, all that types of stuff. So check us out again, patreon.com/WTT podcast, as well as The Trenches on Discord. Thank you all so much. You can view this video on Facebook, YouTube, as well as LinkedIn. And for the audio portion of this, for the flagship show Within the Trenches, you can hear 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone.